Hello, James. Hello, Larry, Nancy, Kate.
Well, Bob, that feeling of being old is not a misimpression. That is true. You are old.
Oh,
You can be both, brother.
yes, I do. Yes, I do. It's only a number, right?
That's right. Enlisted.
That was really nice of you, Councilmember Brown. You're so right.
And so polite.
He is.
What a gentleman.
Sometime.
Hello, Robin.
Hello.
Good evening. We will call the Auburn City Council meeting for February 22nd, 2022 to order. The Auburn City Council meeting tonight will be held in person and virtually. If you would all please rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. And Teresa, would you please call roll?
Deputy Mayor Jay Raj,
I'm here.
Councilmember Baggett,
Here.
Councilmember Baldwin,
I'm here.
Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Councilmember Malinga,
Here.
Councilmember Stearns,
Excused.
Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
I'm here.
All right, thank you. Tonight, we are going to start out with an update on everything that the city is engaging in regarding homelessness. And there will be a few presenters tonight. We want to start out with Dana Hinman, our Director of Administration, who is going to go through a bit of a timeline on what actions have been taken in the city over the last at least 10 years. Dana, are you there?
I am here. Let me get the presentation open real quick.
And council, if you do have questions, try and hold off on them until the presentation is over. But if there is a question that you just absolutely can't hold on to, please raise your Zoom hand and I will call on you when we have an appropriate moment.
Okay. Hopefully you are all seeing my screen.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, 1 second. I'll try one more time. Okay. There we go. How about now?
Yes, it is. It's not in present. There we go. There it is.
Okay. So I am just going to go over a long timeline, hopefully briefly, to just sort of set some background and foundation of all of the efforts that the city of Auburn, along with a lot of its partners, have been working on in response to homelessness. And where we really kind of started in earnest was all the way back in 2011. And that is when we opened our first inclement weather shelter. And that was over, if some of you might remember, we ran that over at Veterans Memorial Park and also used another one of our city buildings in Les Cove Park if we needed capacity. That was only open in the winter time. Basically, if the temperatures were set to be below freezing, we worked along with the Auburn Food Bank to open up some overnight sheltering during those below freezing times. And that went on up until about 2014. And actually still continues today. But in 2014, what we added to that was when we really started seeing a spike in homelessness at Les Cove Park. Many cities had shared with us that their libraries tended to be an area of concern. And in our case, of course, our library is connected to Les Cove Park. And we worked with the library on addressing that, and our police department also restarted their bicycle patrols back in 2014, and the bicycle patrols had an emphasis in the parks and Les Cove, the library specifically, and in our downtown core. And the next year, there was another array of kind of milestone things that happened in our efforts. We combined the efforts of a lot of our different departments that were essentially seeing the same thing. And that is our code enforcement group, our police department, our real estate services, our park staff, to address kind of the public health and safety issues that we were starting to see with the increased homelessness in our city. And at that time, also Mayor Backus convened the Homeless Task Force, and that was made up of a collection of stakeholders within Auburn, ranging from our first responders to city staff, to the hospital, the school district, the Muckleshoot Indian tribe, numerous service providers, our business community, and even just kind of concerned citizens. And the goal with that task force was to really convene the varying mindsets around the issue that we were seeing in Auburn. And that includes those people that had some very strong opinions about, kind of, I guess negative would be a word, as well as those that were trying to address it with, our churches and our service providers, and some of those that were very frustrated with the efforts or the lack of effort that they were seeing at the time. Auburn also convened the regional affordable housing discussion. And some of the things that have sparked from that effort, of course, are the SHAPE and the SKIP efforts around affordable housing in the region. Those discussions were pretty much germinated here in Auburn. And we also joined the Behavioral Health Coalition that helped seek funding for the 125 behavioral health hospital that is now located on the Allenmore campus. The year after that, King County convened an opioid task force, another crisis we were seeing in our communities, of which Auburn was a part of. And that year as well, we began implementing the homeless task force recommendations. And I think it might be interesting for the council. I will share that with you after this meeting of what that list, it was about 45 different recommendations. Many of those recommendations we looked at with very wide eyes, thinking there's no way we could do any of this. But as I reviewed that list the other day, it appears we have done pretty much all of them and more. So as the issue of homelessness did continue to grow We also partnered with Habitat for Humanity. We discovered that we owned a house near Les Gove that was purchased with federal community block grant money, which meant that it was encumbered for decades to be used for some sort of human service activity. And we partnered with Habitat for Humanity to rehabilitate that house, and that house is now being run by Mary's Place. And it is a home for families that are coming out of homelessness and some of their most difficult to house clients. And I would defer to our human services staff on how many families we've had through there, but it is quite a number of families, and that program has seen great success. And then in 2017 is when we did open our full-time day and night sheltering in Auburn. We partnered with Valley Cities and the Auburn Food Bank, and those programs are affectionately known as the Ray of Hope and the Sundown that are still in operation today. And moving into 2018, the city of Auburn joined the King County Task Force, the One Table Task Force, which had a goal of addressing the root causes of homelessness and to kind of work upstream to stop the inflow of people into homelessness. And that year, we also assisted Valley Cities to obtain state funding to build a pilot modular micro-housing project on their site. That is the Blockables project. It was a first of its kind in the nation and has received raves throughout the country on being able to afford modular, flexible, affordable housing. If you haven't been over there to visit those units, they're fantastic. And then also in 2018, the city council at the time approved funding for a human services needs assessment. And that was really designed to ensure that we were prioritizing our grant funds, our general fund, human services grant monies. And you're going to hear more about those later from Jeff Tate. But we did use that study to help inform our future funding efforts. And then in 2019, many of you were on the council when we began negotiating the lease of the strip mall that we're calling the Auburn Consolidated Resource Center. That effort began in earnest in 2019, and I can tell you I was a little bit a part of that negotiation, and it was long and arduous, and our staff did a fantastic job getting us to the finish line on that one. In 2019 is also when the Auburn Police Department partnered with the Salvation Army Street Outreach Team that you'll also hear a little bit more about later when Tate speaks on some of his efforts. And then that next year, we used the Human Services Needs Assessment to establish our differing funding priority areas. A lot of those are directly related to homelessness, housing, and homelessness interventions. And in 2020, we were able to finally finalize the lease on the building on Auburn Way North that continues to grow and be built out and houses a good deal of our social service programs. We were able to help the food bank move the day and night shelter into that new location. And in 2020, we also brought Kent Hay on board, our full-time homeless outreach administrator. And the human services staff that year also began distributing the funds, the reprioritized funds based on the needs survey that had been done. And we have some graphs later in the presentation to kind of show you how those funds are distributed and how our human services committee and staff have been able to distribute those funds in our community. And also in the pandemic, I believe Joy mentioned to you a few weeks ago that we did receive an extra allocation of money from the federal government that was utilized specifically for eviction prevention to the tune of almost $800,000, $792,365 to be exact. And this year, or last year, I'm sorry, we did pass 2 ordinances that were focused specifically on camping in public places, and also another ordinance to address illegal parking. And last year, we proudly opened our King County District Court, our community court, at our resource center on the north end of town, and that too is showing great success. And here we are in 2022, and the work continues. And so I think next we have some information from Kent Hay on some of the demographics of the population that he's seeing on the streets, and some other information for you to kind of more related to our current efforts.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Yes. All right. So looking at the pie charts here, the majority of folks out here that are homeless in Auburn are male, and then following female. And then so age range, our biggest population of folks is from 35 to 54 years of age. And then closely after that is our seniors, 55 to 74. And that's what I'm seeing in the encampments and at the shelters, and at the RVs when I go out and see people. And so and this collection of data right here is coming from all the contacts that I make outside in the encampments, and again at the RVs and the tents and all the stuff that's going on out there, and then also signing people up for coordinated entry and the people that come into the resource center. And so you see that the biggest population we have out here in Auburn, on the street anyway, collecting data, is white, followed by our Black population is definitely picking up out in the homeless encampments. I see a lot more folks of color coming through, and not everybody's from Auburn. We're having a lot of people come from different states and different cities, coming through Auburn, passing through or staying, and in our shelters now. And then so if you go by the level, so level 1 is initial interactions that I have with people. So just the initial interaction I have, we might talk about what some goals might be, but they're not ready to start working on those. And then you have level 2, or people who I've been working with who are actively engaged. So we have a plan and we're working on that, whether that's working on housing vouchers or working on employment or working on just benefits or ID or something. We're actively working on moving forward to try to get them out of the situation. And then level 3 is folks that whatever their situation is resolved, right? So whether that's they're homeless and we got them in the housing and they're stable in housing, or it's someone who possibly could be housed, but there was some situation we were dealing with of maybe they were on the verge of becoming homeless and we were able to move them past that. And so that situation is resolved. Then you have people who just declined this assistance, and then unknown. So I don't usually have, my initial interactions. I could tell you probably from when I first got here to where I'm at now, I don't have a lot of people who necessarily just don't want to talk to me. We always are at the level 1 stage. So there's always that interaction and we're talking. I take the We Care Clinic out with me on Fridays to encampments and to the RVs to offer methadone treatment or Suboxone. I also take a Health Point nurse out with me. She is the Suboxone nurse, and so we go out and she does wound care, and also she gives out Narcan and those types of things. And we have discussions again about treatment and trying to figure out the best plan to move forward. And so if you see the chart there, there's a lot of people that are level 2. And again, that doesn't have to be every single day. Some people, when you're filling out paperwork for the SHS or all those things, it takes time. And so even though we're filling out the paperwork, we're still waiting for mail to come. We're still making phone calls that might take you know, I don't know, you don't call a social worker or hear from a social worker for a couple of weeks or something like that. So there are a lot of people engaged. There's also a lot of people who we're still talking to who just haven't been, you know, ready to come to the table and fully commit to trying to get out here, but we're still having those interactions with them. And then 37 people we've housed, or they've completed their completed the goal. But 37 people have been housed since in 2021. Next slide. Dana, do you want me to talk about this? No, that's Jeff.
These are kind of for the next few are Jeff Tate is going to address directly. So if there's anything else you kind of want to address about your workout in the encampments or anything.
Yeah, I would tell you in the encampment. So again, I go out every day. So I'm out there, I'm outside, I'm with the people, I'm at the encampments, I'm at the RVs. There is it's challenging. You know, one thing I was gonna bring up, I know everybody sees, his name is Chris, and he is your guy who's camping over there in the plaza area there off of Main Street. And I know a lot of people have a lot of input and nobody's helping them and all this stuff, but let me tell you a little bit about Chris. Chris is on Social Security disability. Chris does not want to go into a shelter. Chris does not want to go into a hotel. Chris has a housing voucher, and we're trying to figure out why the process has stopped. So he has a housing voucher. He was supposed to be in housing at the beginning of this month and the end of last month, but something is stalling where there's some kind of background check problem that's happening. And so that's why Chris is out there. He has a phone. He contacts his workers from DESC who's supposed to be getting him in housing. The hard part about some of this stuff is the hard part about helping people and kind of moving people forward is there's a lot of I have to kind of press back on the community a little bit, because there's a lot of handing out of money and things that go on there. And I know people think they're trying to help, but it doesn't move the meter for housing. What it does is kind of stop everything from moving forward. Because I tell everybody all the time, there's nothing that I can give anybody that's better than the money that you're giving them. Because again, homelessness is a lot of instant gratification. So if I'm working out there, I'm housing or something, and then someone steps in and gives somebody $20, that stops the process. We're not moving forward anymore. They've gotten whatever that need was at that moment, and now we're starting from the beginning again. So just a little bit about Chris, though. You know, Chris is going to be housed. Chris is waiting to be housed. Chris has everything. Chris doesn't want to go inside. And so the other thing that we're seeing out there now is, I mean, everybody knew that the heroin was huge along with the meth, but now we have fentanyl and blues that are just taking over. A lot of overdoses. I had someone overdose in front of the resource center the other day, and I had to administer the Narcan and do the CPR. But it's really difficult, and that's again why I take out the treatment agencies. But not everybody wants to go to treatment. Not everybody wants to stop using. Again, there's no reason for people to stop, because again, we're contributing to some of this stuff too. Again, with the money and the giving and not asking for anything in return. So we're part of the problem. We're not the solution. I think it's sad to go out here and literally watch people die, and then come back from the Narcan and then die again and come back. And that's just what you see out in the encampments and the bushes is a lot of that. So yeah, the work is hard. Working with the folks who are homeless is difficult, but trying to work against the people who are keeping people out in the bushes by doing what they're doing is more frustrating than the folks who would probably take the help, but because there's some other incentives not to take the help, they'd rather do that. if that makes sense. Oh, just to tell you about our resource center. So we see about 25 to 30 people every day, every Thursday in the resource center. A lot of people getting help in there. Please come and take a look if you like, stop by. Community court is going strong. We have, I'm not sure how many participants now, but over what we had talked about topping at. So it's over 10. And we've had a few graduates. So it's going good there.
Last week, Sergio mentioned that there were 18, and while there was the judges, King County judges were remote, the maximum would be 20, but that it could be above that once everyone is back in person.
I think I covered what I needed to cover. And is there anything else that I needed to mention? I'm trying to think what I didn't cover.
Yeah. Maybe one of the things when you and I chat about, you're talking about individuals who aren't interested in going inside. Talk about that chronically homeless individual and why perhaps they're not going inside.
Yeah, so I'm dealing with that right now with a few people. You know, one thing, and I'll tell you that I learned in doing this in Redmond, when I did that, when I was doing outreach in Redmond, I used to tell people when I was working out there that, you know, we're making people comfortable outside in the bushes by the things that we're doing. And though I still believe sometimes we're doing that, what I would tell you now is I kind of changed that mentality of it's familiar. We're making it real familiar for people. So I know people, I hear us all the time of, you know, put people in this one area and do all this stuff, but not everybody likes each other out there. They all don't get along. There's a lot of stealing, a lot of assaults. I just recently had to pick somebody up from the hospital after he got beat up so bad, he was unrecognizable. I didn't even know who he was. If I didn't know who he was, I wouldn't have known who he was. That's how bad he got beat up from someone he knows for a long period of time in the encampment. And so there's, again, I think I've always said this, there's a lot of rapes and assaults and stealing from each other and just a lot of behaviors that go out there. But even though people live together in there, when I talk to people about using their housing vouchers together to go inside, they don't want to live with that person. They don't want to be around that person that long. So it's not that people, this is a community and people are, you know, thriving in here and doing all this stuff. It's just familiar. We've kept them out here so long that everything is familiar with them. So when we talk about going into housing and going into this place that's not familiar, people tend to go back to a default when it's uncomfortable. So I have a guy out here who I've been working with a long time, and we've been talking about housing for so long, but every time, you know, I put him into a place, he doesn't want to be in there because it doesn't feel normal, right? So going back out into the park and being around the people, even though he doesn't like them and they steal from him, it's just what's familiar and what feels normal. So it's easy to say, hey, build all this housing and people will go. I tell you, even in the hotel, people ask me about the hotel all the time, and I know they want to go in, but I hear a lot of also, if I go in and people are doing all the stuff that they're doing out here, I don't want to be inside anymore. Because one thing you have to understand is when people are inside, that's your room. And if someone's causing problems and making you uncomfortable next to you, when you're outside, you have an option to move. You have an option to pick up your tent and go to another space and not be around that person. When you're inside, you can't move down the hall away from that person. So you'd rather just go back outside. So I've heard a lot of that. So it's you know, people want to be inside, but they don't want to be inside. There's just a lot of, it's complicated.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Yes, Ken, I hear what you're saying, and my heart goes out to those people, but sometimes we also have to hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm.
I hear this all the time from our citizens that we need to start holding those ones that don't want to go out there, because now they're coming into our homes, into our properties and stuff like that. So when are we going to start holding these people accountable?
Yeah, and in Auburn, I mean, we've been doing that since, we passed the ordinance. There is our ordinance where it says, we have to offer you shelter. That's the law before we can ask you to move from a spot. And so every time we do go out, every time I do meet with these folks, or they're camping in places they're not supposed to be camping, we do offer all the shelter. We do have to get to that point where, I have to put the notice down if people aren't willing to go to shelter. And we have trespassed people from certain areas. The hard part now, again, is with the new law, right? The new where it's for police to grab somebody or put somebody in handcuffs, and it's kind of hindered that a lot when someone doesn't want to move. So it takes a little longer. I think we've made a lot of progress. I mean, I think we've done a good job with trying to stay within these parameters and not have the police get in trouble and that type of stuff. But, we still use what we have. We're still enforcing everything that we can enforce. It just looks a little different.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kent. Oh, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. Kent, I just want to say how much I appreciate your hard work and persistence, and your patience and, what you're doing for our community. And I would agree, it appears to me at least that you're doing a good job. But do we have quantifiable evidence, measurable evidence of the effectiveness of our efforts here? How do we know that we're doing better or we're making progress?
Yeah, that's well, I mean, by the numbers of, again, I know 37 people being housed doesn't seem like a huge dent in when you're seeing all of these people, but the amount of time, it's not as simple as like, hey, I want to go into housing and then housing's available. I mean, some of these people come with nothing at all. So they have no income. They have no benefits. There's no housing voucher. There's nothing. And so we're starting from scratch, which takes months. And so, and then the other part is, and I know, and I always ask people, they always ask me, how do I think it's going? I always ask them, how do they think it's going? Because I know what I see before I get there and what the aftermath looks like. So again, when I first started here, going to Brandon Park and how that looked to where we're at now, if you go to the park, I know some areas, and I know how people have a hard time with this, is just because it's in Auburn doesn't mean that we have jurisdiction. So there are parts of Auburn that are King County, PSC, state, and we don't have jurisdiction on those areas. But in Auburn, when people are camping or people are doing the stuff that they're doing, I think we do a pretty good job of addressing those needs. And so, and trying to come up with again, within the law, trying to come up with ways to address some of those things, like 40th. And we dealt with that. There's people on, that there's a lot of stuff on the sidewalks people couldn't walk through. We were trying to figure out, again, with the Homestead Act, what we could do and what we couldn't do. And if you go down there right now, nobody's there. The sidewalk is clean and people have moved. Some take the help, some don't. But again, we want to make it uncomfortable enough for people to do something different. Because go ahead. I'm sorry, Kent. I just want to say, I have to disagree with you that 37 people doesn't seem like a lot. It seems like a lot to me. But that's 37 lives. But what concerns me is, you're talking about the demand. It's the supply that concerns me. How do we measure that? And I imagine it's a moving target. It is. It's constantly changing. And it's hard. And I mean, there's a lot of things we can fix that's outside of Auburn. I think Auburn has done a good job of putting things in place, but there's bigger than just Auburn, and trying to get through some of these, I always tell people that the system is not set up to help. It's not simple. It's very difficult. I'll just tell you real quick before I stop. I have a young man who I'm working with who he's been homeless on the street with his mom for 2 or 3 years now. He has he's developmentally disabled. His mom was working at Walmart, ended up wasn't taking care of her diabetes. Now she's in the hospital. She lost a foot. And now he's by himself in the shelter because one of the guys he had come to the shelter with passed away from COVID. So now he's by himself in the shelter. He's never had an ID in his life. We're working on getting him a housing voucher, but I can't get him in housing until he has an ID. I cannot get this guy an ID for the life of me because even though I got his birth certificate, we finally got his transcripts. They sent a picture of his yearbook. I go in there and they tell me that's not enough. And so I'm trying to figure out what's, how do we do this? Because Social Security won't give us a Social Security card without an ID. We can't set up an account without an ID. And so you understand the obstacles now of even if he got his housing voucher, we can't even get into housing because he has no ID. So there's always these barriers and obstacles and difficulty of trying to move forward.
Deputy Mayor Jay Raj.
Thank you, Your Honor. Kent, I really appreciate the work you do for our city, and I know the rest of the council does too. My question is Auburn resident, is it because of the Auburn residents giving food and giving money is causing a problem?
It does. I know people think that they're helping. I know people get mad listening to all this, but I always question this, and I even talk to the people who are living outside, is when we're doing these big feeds and we're giving all these clothes and we're doing all this stuff, it's not moving anybody forward into housing, right? Our goal, my goal, and I think the city's goal is how can we get people set up and get them stable enough to go into housing and then be housed, right? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I understand, I'll tell you this, when I'm out here, I don't have a lot of people asking me for food, right? There's not a lot of people asking me for food. Because one of the things, we try to get you on the EBT. I work with Debbie at the food bank. There's food pickup, there's things that you can go and do. Then we also have the shelter. We want people to go into the shelter. There's breakfast, there's lunch, there's dinner. And so we have a lot of that stuff covered. And I know people are like, well, people don't want to do all that stuff. But my thing is, when you bring things, when I first started doing this job, when I first walked out into the bushes and started talking to people, the first thing they would ask me was, what can you give me, right? Do you have food? Do you have clothes? Do you have all this stuff? And I said, no, I just have help. And so that was they were used to, is people just coming out giving stuff, not offering assistance to get out of the situation, but what can I give you to make you more familiar, right, in your homelessness? And that's what I still feel. And so when people are giving people money on the intersections, and there's people who, when I pull up to the stop sign of different places and they're panhandling over there, I tell them, when are you going to come meet me on Thursday at the resource center, or come meet me at the library now, since I'm over there on Tuesdays? And we have a plan, but yet the sign that they hold up, I know the information on there is not true, but you don't know the information is not on there is not true. And so you're willing to give, which means they're willing to work. You see what I'm saying? They're willing to stay away from coming to the resource center in order to get that $20, $40, $100, $300. And we could not move forward to get them benefits from the housing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Appreciate the answer.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing with us the progress that you've been making. My question for you, Kent, is with the work that you're doing to get folks IDs, to get them into housing, to get them off the street, is what services are we providing as a city once folks cross that threshold into housing? So are we providing access to other human services like counseling or job training or access to work to help stabilize them within that space? So what's the transition? What's available there?
Yeah, I'm the transition. Because I still, so for me, I don't believe just putting people in the housing because that's not successful, right? Like there has to be a lot more than that. And so I know everybody always says I'm just one person and you're just one person, and I understand that. But when I do house people, I make sure that one is I work with the pastor out here that helps me to furnish units, right? Because that's hard for people once you get them into a place and they have no bed and they have no furniture and they have no dishes. And so luckily Pastor Josh is great for helping with that. But then also I make sure that I try to be available as much as possible. So even if I house you out in Seattle, like I just housed someone in Seattle, I keep up with them. I try to figure out what's going on. He's bored. So we're talking about what can we do to put things in place, right? So the problem is some people, when they're on like HIN vouchers, if you work, then your HIN is discontinued. So you can't get a job. There's certain things you can't do. And so then we're talking about the library and things that have access over there and how can we get you hooked up in certain things, or even the counseling part is hard because there's a backup. There's trying to get into mental health counseling. There's months, waits in order to get in. Some people don't want to do chemical dependency treatment, which is fine. But there's, it's making sure that if someone calls me, I'm still available. That's the great part about working for Auburn and not a nonprofit or working for the city is I don't have to close a case. You see what I'm saying? Like we're always working together. So regardless if it's a year from now and you still need help and you call, I'm still available. We don't have to do an intake or paperwork and stuff like that. So it's about still connecting those pieces, but also being available. So I try to do that role as well.
Okay.
A lot of your nonprofits, a lot of agencies don't work inside the home. There's not a lot of agencies that go into the home and continue to work with you. I have a lady right now who, they'll give her with CPS involved and they give her 6 months of something and then they close the case and then she's on her own again. So there's not a lot of in-home long-term services for people if they get into housing.
And are you aware of any other programs in Auburn that provides that support after the threshold?
Nope. I wish there was that. Again, a lot of your agencies don't do aftercare. Once someone is housed, they usually have to close the case within a certain time.
Okay.
And then if they become homeless again or something like that, then they can reach out. But yeah.
That's one of the discussion points with the King County Regional Homelessness Authority that I keep bringing up because of the information that Kent provides is the gap funding that we need to provide, not having parallel or two different agencies doing the exact same work, but filling those gaps where those needs are. That's the significant piece that we're missing and that I will keep asking for funding to provide. Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Thank you, Mayor. Ken, we're always asking you to provide us with information and everything. So I want to ask you, what do you want from us council members? I hear that us council members are not doing enough. So I am asking you, what is it that you would like us council members to help you on?
I would like, just to, I think if people understood that help doesn't always look like giving, help or not giving straight to people. I don't know. I mean, we've done a lot here in Auburn, again, with ordinances and things like that. But I think people have to understand, though, that the state supersedes a lot of the stuff that we do. So it's hard, even though we in Auburn, we've put things in place to address a lot of these issues. We're kind of, you know, there's only certain things that we can do after the state mandates things. The other part, you know, we're working on some different pilot programs that are coming. Trying to get some of these apartment complexes to overlook some people's criminal histories, to get some apartments to take a chance on some folks. I'm partnering with Housing Connector and a whole bunch of different places, but we need more apartment complexes to step up and be willing to rent to some of these folks. Again, prices are high. So I guess, I don't know, as council, I think I would just ask you more to explain, I guess, to some of your constituents that Auburn has really, I mean, we're doing better than most. We put a lot of things in place. I think people have to understand that with these new laws and the Senate writing these new policies and things like that, it really kind of hampers sometimes the way we do business here in Auburn. And so maybe just if you educate the folks who are angry with what's going on here, to that it's not the mayor and it's not the city that's not doing their job. It's, we put things in place and this is above us.
Well, I would just want to take the time to thank you for sharing everything that you are going through. What a stressful job. And appreciate everything you're doing and continue to do for our city. And just thank you. And just keep doing what you're doing and letting us know, so that this way we can be able to educate our constituents when they do ask us. It's always nice to go back and review what we have done and what we're doing and what we're going to be doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Jay Rush.
Thank you, Your Honor. I do have one other question, and that is, as far as education is concerned, for the public, would putting up signs along the street where people are, I don't want to say panhandling at this point, but that's what it is. Not to give any money out to these folks and advertise it to the general public as well.
So we have been working, we worked with the state originally to ask if there could be those types of signs, keep the change or give your change to your favorite nonprofit to support these services for individuals experiencing homelessness. But the state will not put those signs up. The best they will do is put no loitering signs up. There are a couple of those keep the change signs. One of them is in the median right by the Highway 18 on-ramp and off-ramp between 6th and Cross Street. So there is a sign there, but people will stand right there and ask for money. And as Kent said, they may have a sign that says, you know, need food, need gas money, whatever it is. Typically those signs are not accurate. And Councilmember Troutman, I know you asked what can be done, what council can do. My ask would be to continue to support the work that Kent is doing, and we are doing the speed round interviews to hire an additional person to work with Kent that can help fill some of those gaps, because when you hear all of the work that Kent is doing, he's spread pretty thin. And then I also ask him to be present in meetings where we're talking about and planning. So he is spread very thin. There is nothing that he hasn't been able to do yet that we've asked of him or that he's wanted to do, but I want to have some assistance for Kent so he can take a day off when he needs to and not see individuals out there going backwards because Kent is not having those interactions with them. So we'll be excited to introduce you to the new person as soon as we get them on board. Councilmember Troutman.
I did have one more question. We have, Ken, how are we going to, what are we going to do with the homelessness around the downtown businesses, the downtown area, the Safeway area? That is one of the areas that I hear constantly concerns. How are we going to, what are we doing with that area?
Well, I'll tell you that with the bike, because the bike team goes out every single morning, because people do still, at night when we're gone, they kind of go back into that area when the stores are closed and start camping. And then the bike team in the morning comes by and make sure people aren't camping there. The other part, I mean, the Safeway has to do their job too. Right? I always tell businesses at the same time, we all have to work together. And so really Safeway they're able to trespass people if they like. And so when they're on Safeway property or they're in front of the store, they're panhandling in that area. There is this median thing, this middle where I see people at, but for the most part, again, when I go over there to Safeway, because I know a lot of those people who are on the corner there, they have the right to trespass. They're on that property, and the Safeway doesn't want to do that. That's a Safeway issue. But as far as Auburn is concerned, again, we still offer shelter. We still have our ordinance. We can still post a sign. People can still be trespassed if they don't want to participate. And so I feel like from when the new laws and stuff got written, we were kind of figuring out what to do, and we had to take some time. But I feel like we've done a pretty good job of addressing some of that stuff in the daytime, at least. At nighttime, it's a different story.
The nighttime is a challenge, and for any of the businesses that may have signed in tonight to watch this, we realize that doesn't change your frustration with property crimes that are being committed on your property. We understand that. And there'll be an opportunity if any of you have questions for Chief Collier during this presentation as well on what our police officers can and cannot do. Again, with trespassing someone does not mean that you are going to arrest someone, right? And sometimes it means providing a citation and then giving that to our city prosecutors for them to decide whether they're going to file charges or not. Because with the way the current state laws are written, property crimes are considered very low level, and limiting the abilities of police officers to detain an individual. That's being addressed right now in the state legislature on the ability to detain, Terry stop, if you will. But right now, it is very clear that our officers are limited in their ability to work on property crime as it's occurring. Deputy Mayor Jay Raj.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to see if we can get the slides.
We will have those for you, yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Right, and Kent isn't going away if you have questions after you see the rest of the presentation, nor is Dana, or next on the list is Jeff Tate. So and Kent's taking his photo off of there right now. So he's ready for Jeff to start his part of the presentation.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, City Council, and Mayor. My part of this presentation is really to speak about human services funding. And before jumping into, I think, 4 slides here, I think the way that an easy way to characterize all that you've heard about so far, and then what you're about to hear about, is that we kind of approach human services, of which homelessness is kind of one area of human services. We approach it in 2 different ways. And this is strategically designed to approach this two different ways. And the first area is partly what you've heard about, which is our proactive city actions. So whether it's setting up community court, or whether it's the work that Kent does, or setting up the ACRC, those are all things that the city of Auburn is very proactively doing and managing, and it's day-to-day type of operations. The world of human services, and it was great timing that last week Joy Scott and her team provided a presentation to City Council on Community Services 101, and human services is part of that. And this is all of the relationships that we have with nonprofit agencies in and around our community. So you heard from last week, or you heard from Joy last week, and Kyla, a briefing about how human services grant funding works in the city of Auburn. So I have a couple slides to show what some of the investments are that we've made historically and that we continue to make, and a little bit of information about how we prioritize investments and things of that nature. So this 2020 slide I thought it was an interesting slide to display because the 5 categories you see on the left there were different in 2020 than they were in 2021. So I'm not going to move to the next slide yet, but I just want you to know you're going to see this next slide that shows what we're doing today. So while looking at 2020, if you add up all 5 of those categories, and those are dollar numbers at the end of each bar, if you add up all those categories, it adds up to $490,000. And that red category at the bottom, the $161,000 or so, is the investments we were making prior to 2021 in homelessness prevention and housing stability. So we had a $490,000 total budget, $161,000 of that going into this one category. That's about 33% of the overall human services funding. So when you see these categories within each one of those groups, there are several nonprofit agencies that were funded and that provide a variety of different types of services throughout the city. Recall last week, Joy and Kyla talked about that being a competitive grant process. So every 2 years, applicants could submit their applications for funding. It's always highly competitive. A lot of applicants asking for a lot of money, and the city can't award all of the applicants all of the funds that they're asking. So the Human Services Committee is the City Council appointed committee that vets those applications, and ultimately that's how we end up with sort of this cutoff of who made the cut and who's getting funded and who didn't make the cut and is not getting funded. So the reason that the 2020, so chronology gets perhaps a little confusing to describe, but I wanted to show this 2020 slide because if you rewind a year into 2019, actually rewind 2 years to 2018. In 2018, City Council approved a line item budget to do what's called a Human Services Needs Assessment, or Community Needs Assessment. So that funding was approved by Council in 2018. In 2019, that needs assessment occurred, and we brought that forward to City Council at the very end of 2019. And that needs assessment started to identify different rankings or groupings of priorities than what we had historically been funding. We operate on a biennium funding cycle. So when that was presented in 2019, we were already in the middle of the grants that we had already awarded, which take us through the end of the year 2020. So it's not until 2021 did the new priorities go into effect. And Dana, if you could move to the next slide, please. So here's what 2021 funding looks like, and it's identical for 2022 as well, because we have a 2-year budget, plus we provide 2-year grant awards. So the first thing the council did as part of this 2021 budget was increase the human services budget from $490,000 to $680,000. So if you add up all those numbers on the right-hand side, they're going to add up to that bigger number of $680,000. The 5 areas that you see on the left are the 5 categories, the 5 priority categories that were created in that needs assessment back in 2019. And again, you'll see 3 red categories here, all of which have to do with homelessness and housing stability. And when you talk about homelessness, you have to talk about housing stability because we need to make sure that we're keeping people in homes as well, as much as we're trying to get people who are currently unhoused into homes as well. So if you add up those 3 red categories, that's about $456,000, or 67% of that budget, that overall human services budget. So we're just starting. I mean, it's interesting because here we are in early 2022. We're just at that point where we're able to compile data and present results of the work that's been occurring from our nonprofit partners. I think Joy had mentioned, or Kyla mentioned last week, that we had about 80 different agencies apply for funding. We award 50 agencies with funding. We received something like $1.5 million or so in requests. We award $680,000 in requests. So I will say that when you get into the 3 categories that are shown in red, under Homelessness Interventions, working from the bottom, we fund 8 different agencies in that category. Under Housing and Associated Services, we fund 8 agencies. And under Housing Related Supportive Services, we fund 5 agencies. So homelessness interventions are really about getting people into homes, into housing. So that's interrupting homelessness. Housing and Associated Services are people, if you're already home, how do you keep people in their home? They might need some rental assistance to avoid a couple bad months, something like that, where they are housed, but they're on the brink of losing housing. So that's what that category is. It's about keeping people in a home. And then housing related supportive services are some of the counseling services that might be important for people who are suffering from maybe they're suffering from a mental health a situation or a drug addiction situation, and those things are compromising or could compromise the potential for them to stay housed if we weren't providing some additional side services to those folks. So I know this because the data is really recent here in February 2022, that those categories of those 3 categories, and you look at that amount of $456,000, that has provided direct assistance to 905 people in this community, which is about $505 per person if you do the math on that. Dana, can you move to the next slide, please? This slide too is interesting, just in the sense that in 2020 and 2021, we received an additional influx of federal money through CDBG, COVID and CARES funding. So we received 3 different rounds of funding, and you can see that eviction prevention has been where most of that money has gone. $792,000, a little more than that, has gone into eviction prevention. And I'd say right now about half of that has been spent. The other half is still under contract with a variety of service providers to June 30th of 2022. So just real rough math, if you take $792,000 and you cut that in half, you're at about 395 or something like that. And that eviction prevention, that amount of money has gone to help 425 households. So that's about $930 per assist through these additional funds, which we won't see those funds again. Those will expire June 30th, 2022. And then Dana, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the last slide I think that I had, and this is another set of demographic data, and this is what our nonprofit agencies report to us. So every quarter, those nonprofits that are being funded have to provide the city with reports of who was served, how many people were served. We've also asked them to provide stories to go along with the numbers, because numbers are one thing, but it's also good to read how people are affected. And you'll routinely see in the weekly roundup those stories relayed to council members as we highlight a service provider each week. So you'll see that some of the demographics are a little different, and that's not surprising, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that different agencies have different kinds of reaches into our community. And while Kent does so much of his work out in the field, interacting with folks, this may be, other kinds of interfaces that occur between a service provider and a community out there. And whether that's in an office, whether that's over the phone, whether that's by computer, whether that's going to a faith-based organization and meeting folks where they're at, there's a variety of different types of interfaces that could occur. So you can see sort of what that race and ethnicity breakdown looks like. And the last thing that I want to say, and it's not on a slide, but I think it's important also in that world of keeping people safe and warm in their homes, is what you heard last week about the Housing Home Repair Program. And that's a CDBG funded program. And as Joy mentioned last week, something like 55 or 58 homes that have been repaired for income qualified folks. That because not every home is a single person household, there were about 100 or so people that were affected by those repairs that we do, whether it's replacing a water heater, fixing someone's plumbing, fixing their heat in their home, fixing a leaky roof, all those kinds of things that get done to keep people in their home and not forced out of their home. And I think that's the last slide. At the risk of pushing, there you go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate the opportunity. And Jeff, great report. Want to quick comment and a question. That eviction prevention, wow, what an impact. Can we imagine what it would have been like without the American Rescue Plan Act monies and other opportunities to help people stay in housing? We would have had to hire 10 more Kents if that weren't the case, I think. On the 2021 job training and education bar that I saw in like 3 slides previously, could you tell me a little bit, where does that job training happen? What kind of job training are we talking?
Well, there's a variety of different job training. What would be probably great as a follow-up is, I'll answer your question directly in a second, but maybe as a follow-up for all of council, is we do have a spreadsheet that lists out by priority area each agency and the specific program within the agency that's being funded and the amount of funding that they received, as well as the amount of funding that they requested. So I've got that list in front of me, very convenient. So one agency is AJAC, and it says that their program is the APM Training Center. I see that International Rescue Committee, Refugee and Immigrant Youth School Services is listed. Orion Industries Employment Services, yeah, those are the 4 that I see on the list.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I'm co-chair of the Washington State Workforce Training Board, and not all training programs are created equal, and it's frustrating to me sometimes. And I didn't hear that in this list, where we have training programs that are short term but not effective in terms of giving people the ability to provide for themselves in a living wage situation. So anytime I can talk to you about that, I would love to set an appointment with you to talk about that a little more.
Well, I would welcome that. And just a reminder that it's bigger, of course, than just Auburn. So what you'd like to kind of inform us about could be useful, because Joy mentioned last week that we're part of a King County consortium. So when our grant process opens in a few months, and all that application opportunity opens up, we really we put the word out to a lot of folks, but you have to submit an application in order to be considered. And there are 16 King County cities doing that at the same time. So it could really be a nice sort of economy of scale for someone to prepare one application and submit it to multiple agencies.
Thank you, Jeff.
And I'll just put a plug in also for the Thursday afternoon resource center. We are always looking for other opportunities for the individuals. It's not just for those in community court, but it is a community resource center where there are individuals in there to assist with perhaps housing. We're looking for new providers for the assessments that need to be completed. So there's always an opportunity for more organizations to be involved in that Thursday resource center as well. Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to check, I believe I heard you say, Jeff, that the eviction prevention, we've spent down about half of that. So we've probably got about 395,000 remaining, and that expires June 30th. Are we going to be on track to get that spent so we don't have anything not used?
There won't be money left on the table for that. There's too much need out there. So I feel really good about, getting to the June 30th date. And I know that, that's CARES funding. So I know that also, there are opportunities potentially through the use of ARPA funds to extend beyond that even as well. But I think our commitment to council and to the community is we're not going to be giving any of that eviction prevention money back.
Okay, that's what I was hoping to hear. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, council, that you might have? You've got all of the resources right here. And again, Chief Collier is here as well in case you have any questions of him on the policing. But we wanted to make sure that you had a comprehensive understanding of what's going on in the community. And we share the frustrations as well as some of our community members do. I look to see who is listening in, and I'm familiar with the names and very familiar with the expensive challenges that they are facing by doing business here. That is not how we want them to be spending their money. And I don't have all of the answers for the individuals who are experiencing these break-ins, who are losing money because one individual had a delivery van, a brand new one, stolen. It's a very brightly colored vehicle. You can't miss it, but individuals are doing these things, and it's really frustrating for all of us. So again, I'm hoping for some of the reforms down in Olympia to go into effect. I believe March 10th, they would be on an emergency approval. So that's my plug for that. Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you, Your Honor. I did have two more questions. The first, I was curious what the status and progress was with the hotel in Auburn that had been purchased through King County. How have we been able to get that retrofit to receive any residents yet, or do we have any status on that work?
So I just want to make sure that everybody understands, the city of Auburn, is not doing any of that work. That is King County in the Health Through Housing initiative. That is 0.1% sales tax that was imposed on the county throughout the county, with the exception of any city that imposed their own sales tax. Auburn did not do that. So that the hotel, and you will be hearing an update from Leo Floor with King County at our March 7th council meeting. For the last 2 months, that hotel has been utilized as an isolation and quarantine facility. The hotel in Kent was on overflow, and so Auburn was utilized. King County reached out and asked if we would be willing to allow that use. We agreed with safety measures in place and security measures. And there, as of today, there are no longer any individuals utilizing the INQ, so it will be shutting down. And then we will go back to the process, working with King County to identify the appropriate service provider to oversee that hotel. It will probably be at least 4 months from now before you see any individuals in there. And given that government doesn't always work quickly, even though we would like them to, Jeff and I were talking earlier today, and Kent, and it's probably longer than 4 months from now, but that would be a best case scenario.
All right. Thank you for clarifying. I realize there can be confusion between things happening at the county level and the city level. I know that we work closely to make sure that we're in sync with what's happening there. So thank you for clarifying and providing that timeline. And then I'll let it go back to the floor, but I do have one more question, depending on if anybody else has anything.
I don't see any hands raised right now, Councilmember Baldwin. So if you'd like to proceed, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. I did notice in the slides that Director Hinman had presented that the capacity for beds through the Behavioral Health Coalition was about 125 in 2015 at the Allenmore campus. Have we seen an increase since that time? And is there any backlog in demands to get into those spaces? Need versus capacity?
Dana, do you want to answer?
Sure.
Me too.
Yeah, the Allenmore campus, it's in Tacoma, and it is, its service area is a regional service area. I will tell you that that has also been a slow roll to get that hospital fully operational. And with COVID and some other complications that have happened along the way. So no, they are not at capacity for several reasons. And one of which is that they still have some expanding work to do to fully staff and fully operationalize the facility.
Okay. All right.
Councilmember Baldwin, we were part of the coalition that provided support, and also we were part of the travel team, I guess, if you will, that would go around to some of the organizations like Milgard and Rake and others to ask for funding to fund that hospital. That was a unique situation where it was multi-care and Franciscan working together. That's two very strong healthcare organizations coming together because of the need. Washington is one of the lowest ranked out of all states for behavioral health bed availability and mental health professionals. And that hasn't changed much since the time that Allenmore Hospital has been built. So we will continue to advocate for more behavioral health funding. We have offered ideas up through at the congressional level of forgiving college loans for those who are going into the behavioral health field, who will stay in the field for a specific amount of time, because even with some of the laws that were passed last year requiring mental health professionals or designated crisis responders to respond when a police officer is called to the scene, we are woefully underserved, as you all know.
All right. Thank you for the history. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation from the directors from Kent. As you can tell, we have a great deal of passion around the work that's being accomplished. There's always more to be done. We wish we didn't have to do this kind of work. And I know those listening in wish we didn't have to do this kind of work either, but it is unfortunately necessary at this point in today's environment. And so we will continue to do that work. We'll keep you posted on who we are able to hire to work closely with Kent. And anytime you have any questions, you know where we are. All right, we will move on to appointments. We have tonight board and commission appointments. The city council to approve the following appointments to boards and commissions for a 3-year term expiring December 31st, 2024. To the Arts Commission, Christopher Olds, and to the Auburn Municipal Airport Advisory Board, Justin Heater and Jay Minor. Do we have a motion to approve the appointments? Councilmember Brown. You are muted, Councilmember.
Has to happen once a day, I'm afraid.
At least.
I would move that we approve the appointments for Christopher Olds for the Arts Commission, Auburn Municipal Airport Advisory Board for Justin Heater and Jay Minor.
Thank you. Councilmember Trout Manuel.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. You know, democracy is a participatory sport, and we're fortunate in this community to have qualified citizens, residents that step up and help our city govern itself. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Are there any questions or comments about the appointments? All right, if there are none, if you would please unmute. All those in favor of the appointments as stated to the Arts Commission and the Auburn Municipal Airport Advisory Board, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Motion passes, and I want to express my appreciation for Christopher Olds, Justin Heater, and Jay Minor for their willingness to serve their community. Thank you. Teresa, do we have any agenda modifications this evening?
No, Your Honor, we don't.
All right, we will move to audience participation. This is the place on the agenda where the public is invited to speak to the city council on any issue. The public can participate in person or submit written comment in advance. Participants can submit written comments via mail, fax, or email. All written comments must be received prior to 5 p.m. on the day of the scheduled meeting and must be 350 words or less. Comments can be mailed to City of Auburn, attention Sean Campbell, City Clerk, 25 West Main Street, Auburn, Washington, 98001. Fax comments to attention Sean Campbell, City Clerk, at 253-804-3116, or email comments to publiccomment@auburnwa.gov. And I believe we did receive public comment this afternoon. Teresa, if you would like to read those into the record, please.
Okay, we have received 7 public comments. The first one is from Hiram Silva. Mr. Silva expressed his concern with homelessness and the impact it has on local businesses. Barbara Swensetzer, Ms. Swensetzer expressed her concerns regarding noise and safety related to homelessness near the Ames Apartments. Garrett Haynes, Mr. Haynes expressed his concerns regarding the level of homelessness in Auburn. Mickey Taylor Tellman, Mr. Tellman discussed working to help to help the homeless in the community before a problem becomes a problem. Michael Christensen, Mr. Christensen expressed his concerns that homelessness is having on him and his property owner and his Buds and Blooms tenants. Brian Brewster, Mr. Brewster expressed his frustration and concerns over the litter problem in Auburn. Cheryl Rakes, Ms. Rakes expressed her concerns for the safety of businesses in Auburn due to homelessness.
Thank you, Teresa. And we have no one in the audience tonight in council chamber, so that will conclude public comment for this evening. We have no correspondence for council review tonight, so we'll move to council ad hoc committee reports. Council ad hoc committee chairs may report on the status of their ad hoc council committee's progress on assigned tasks and may give their recommendation to the city council, if any. And while we now have 2 ad hoc committees, only one has met to identify a chair. So we still have the finance ad hoc committee, and that is chaired by Councilmember Baggett.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Council Ad Hoc Finance Committee, consisting of Councilmember Baldwin and myself, we reviewed 122 pages of 2022 claims vouchers totaling $6.9 million, dated February 22nd, 2022. The committee also reviewed payroll vouchers for the period of February 3rd through February 16th, 2022, in the total amount of $3 million. All questions by the committee for the finance department were answered to the committee's satisfaction, and upon completion of our review, we recommend council approval of these vouchers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Baggett. All right, we will move to the consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered by the city council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed. Do we have a motion? Deputy Mayor Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. I like to move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. And for the second, Councilmember Baggett.
I'll second that, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. The consent agenda consists of study session and regular council meeting minutes, the claims and payroll vouchers as described by Councilmember Bob Baggett and recommended by the Finance Committee for approval by council.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council? All right, if you would please unmute. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Consent agenda passes. We have no unfinished business this evening, so we will move to ordinances. We have one ordinance this evening, ordinance number 6849, an ordinance establishing the local sales and use tax rate for local revitalization financing for 2022. Councilmember Baggett. Councilmember Baggett, you are muted.
There we go. I move to approve ordinance 6849.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Baggett.
Yes, this proposed ordinance authorizes up to $250,000 per year for local revitalization by levying a 0.0184% sales tax credit against the state sales tax in conformance to Senate Bill 5045, approved by the state legislature during a regular session in 2009. This tax credit is available to the city for up to 25 years by approval of a city ordinance each year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Baggett. Are there any questions, council? All right, all those in favor of ordinance number 6849, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Motion passes. All right, we will move to mayor and council reports. At this time, the mayor and city council may report on significant items associated with their appointed positions on federal, state, regional, and local organizations. And I'm just going to remind you, council, that we do have an executive session after this that will be at least 20 minutes in length. So just wanting to let you know that. You do with that as you wish. Deputy Mayor Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have one report to make, and that is earlier this month, we had the SCA Public Issues Committee, and there was some important updates we got from the SCA. Legislative session 2022 SCA legislative agenda was recommended by the PIC, was approved by the SCA Board of Directors in January. Key priority areas include requests to promote economic recovery, invest in transportation and mobility, address housing instability, clarify certain statewide law enforcement reforms, and address the physical needs of the citizen. The next topic we talked about was regional transportation plan. And that one, the future plan includes updates driven by changes since it was updated in 2018, as well as policy focus driven by community and board engagement. Between now and 2050, the region is projected to grow about 1.6 million people and be home to an additional 1.1 million jobs. And that's what I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Trout Manuel.
I don't have a report, but I would like to do a shout out. This weekend, I spent my time in Tacoma for the state wrestling championship. And because I went to see
point of order, Mayor.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Earlier on today, city attorney sent out a notification to all of us that we're only supposed to talk about regional and assigned committee items.
I understand that, and I just wanted to do a shout out to one of our high school girls in Auburn High School who won a championship in the wrestling team. So I just wanted to acknowledge her.
Thank you. City Attorney Como, did you want to weigh in? I saw that you turned your camera on, so I just wanted to give you that opportunity.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just remind Council that the reports during this meeting are to be related for reports on significant city-related activities since the last regular meeting. The mayor and council members shall limit their reports to not more than 3 minutes. I've read that from the council rules of procedure, which council has drafted and adopted.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Trout Manuel. Councilmember Baggett.
Thank you, Your Honor. As your city's representative to the King County Regional Transit Committee, or RTC, we met on Wednesday, February 16th to review and discuss the very comprehensive draft of the PSRC, or Puget Sound Regional Council, Regional Transportation Plan. That's a mouthful. That is currently out for public comment until February 28th. This plan is updated every 4 years to assess the current transportation system in the central Puget Sound region and includes future plans and how these improvements will perform as the region grows. An important part of this plan update is the financial strategy to obtain federal funding over the next 22 years to align with Vision 2050, which is part of our regional plan. The plan outlines $300 billion, that's billion with a B, in transportation investments over the next 28 years, and includes approximately $169 billion for maintenance and preservation, with $131 billion projected for system improvements. Although 86% of the plan is covered by projected revenue sources, there remains a 14% revenue gap that needs to be funded with new revenue sources. The draft plan includes an outline of proposed new revenue sources being considered, such as a possible replacement of the motor vehicle fuel tax with a road usage charge. I do encourage everyone to review this plan and provide comments by February 28th. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Baggett. Councilmember Brown.
I have no report tonight, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilmember Malenga.
No report, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember, pardon me, Councilmember Baldwin.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. I will report on the Regional Policy Committee that I serve as vice chair on Wednesday, February 9th. As I've mentioned in previous reports, the restorative community pathways, where the four mayors in South King County have had some concerns over what the restorative community pathway program is and some of the offenses that are eligible for that. At the Regional Policy Committee, we did add at the RPC, we added the RCP to our work plan for the year so that we will have an overview of the program at our March meeting. And then I have asked for review outcome-based information as the program has had an opportunity to experience some graduations, if you will, through the program so that we are informed on how the program is progressing. On Friday, February 11th, I was involved in the hiring committee for the SHAPE manager, similar to Angela, our SKIP manager for South King Housing and Homeless Partners. SHAPE is the South Sound Housing Affordability Partners, and we are looking for a executive director of that program, and I do believe that there will be an offer. With the SKIP manager, Angela is a City of Auburn employee. For SHAPE, because the administrative agency is Pierce County, the new executive director will be a Pierce County employee. Those are the only two items, other than we continue to watch what's going on and in Olympia and testify when we believe it's important on the House bills as well as public safety issues. And at this time, we do have need for an executive session. The City Council will adjourn into an executive session per RCW 42.30.110, subsection 1I, to discuss potential litigation for approximately 20 minutes. City Attorney Como and Chief of Police Collier will be required to attend. There is no anticipated action after the executive session. So Council, you did receive call-in information, so we will need you to leave this meeting, sign into the new meeting, and then we'll be back. Thank you. All right, council, we are back from executive session. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.